I'm here to say that Adam Schiff should be expelled from the House. It's quite easy to do. Article 1, Section 5 says, Article 1, Section 5, our beloved Constitution, which never lets us down. It says, each House may, with the concurrence of 2/3, expel a member. I'm running for Congress myself right now in New Hampshire, and if elected, I will be pleased to propose such an expulsion. It's hardly ever used. You may recall there was a case of Adam Clayton Powell, and he was expelled, but he took it to court, and there was a technical reason why it was wrong, and so he got back in, but then they did it to Trafford County, and since they never do it to anyone, you can be sure that there was some special reason for ganging up on Trafford County. So I'm not interested to gang up on Mr. Schiff. I'm interested to say, dear Americans, would you please stop listening to this garbage that's coming out of the January 6th so-called hearings. A hearing, I guess it could be one-sided. I guess it would be all right if it's one-sided, but then no one is ever going to know if a decision that issued forth from it, so far they're not issuing any decisions, but that you would not know if that was fair if you hadn't heard witnesses on the other side. And though I'm a major fan of Senator Rand Paul, the one time he let us down, I think, was when Adam Schiff and the others were doing impeachment number 2 for Trump, or was it the first one? I think it was the second one, and he, Rand Paul, must have been the first one because Rand Paul had a slight majority in the Senate at that moment. He said, we, the Republicans, don't want to have any, we're not going to discuss the evidence. They had enough votes to say, as soon as the House brought over the impeachment articles and the Senate could vote to convict or not convict, they had enough Republicans to say, we don't have to bother to listen to evidence. But then how did the public ever know what it was all about? So listening to one side is foolish. All right, now who am I to have any comments on the content of what is being said about the election theft? Although I personally have done some research and I think it was stolen, I also know that it is common for elections to be stolen, and early in our history there was something in the Philadelphia area that was called the trial of the stairs, and as you went in to vote you had to go upstairs to do it, and at the foot of the stairs were opponents. If they knew which way you were going to go, they'd just give you a few punches, and maybe you'd decide not to go up the stairs, whilst their own people could flow through freely. So that's life. We know that happens. And even what is happening today is very humorous in terms of Liz Cheney and Schiff and the others making up all these terrible sins that Trump has committed. Notice they didn't make any hearings when he was doing certain things that they should have had hearings about, but never mind. They are even suggesting he may be arrested or convicted or something. Well, let's see what we can do about that. My interest in it is mainly that once we are lying all the time, once we're exposed to this sort of thing, and most people sitting at home are on either side and they think the other side is a bunch of liars, the problem for our culture is that it's accepted then. That is the way people are. Yeah, that's it. And once it's accepted, then it's also acceptable. And it's very hard to get up a sort of moral indignation about it going on. But I can tell you that it's going on, and us not stopping it is disastrous. For example, I happened to look at some package of processed food the other day in my kitchen, and there was something questionable, and I thought, my transaction of purchasing that thing makes me part of a contract. It's contract law, but how will contract law be supported in the courts in the future? It won't, because truth has to be a standard, and truth was very much a standard when I was young, and you can't let it go. You really cannot give that one away. It's too, it's essential to social relations that we insist on truth. So this nonsense that's going on every day with some new, friend of Mr. Trump's who's going to be disloyal to him, or somebody else that found out a thing he said, like a tweet. By the way, when Twitter said no more Trump, it wasn't for Trump to complain, it was for all of us. He did complain, and he went to court, and of course they threw it out. He had an excellent case against Twitter for interfering with his constitutional rights, but Twitter can do that. Twitter never owed him any privilege of speaking, but after a few years of talking on Twitter, when it was known that that was the president's mode of communication, for someone to come in and prevent that is, seditious to say the least. And to say that all these important videos of research are now not up to community standards, that's not true. Anyone can see that's not the reason why they're being taken down. But again, once we have given into it and say, we can't get that up there on YouTube anymore because, you shouldn't say that. It's cuckoo to understand, to accept the phrase, it's against community standards. In the old days, obscenity, I think nudity, and maybe some other thing was against community standards, and that seemed reasonable because the thought was people in general don't want to see it, so why throw it at them? Of course, in YouTube you have to go and ask for it, so it's not the same thing, but long story short, the January 6th hearings are really harmful. And why should I pick on Schiff to expel? I guess I could pick on any of them, but he's the one saying, I think that it was tried to get Miss Marjorie Greene kicked out. No. You don't kick somebody out who has the opposite view. Debate and argumentation is absolutely needed. And last night I heard on TV that once the people, which was Sidney Powell and someone else, were up in the residential part of the White House screaming, well, first of all, that's nobody's business if they were in the residential part, but they can scream. It's okay. This is not a crime for people to, they weren't saying it was a crime. They said it shows that he's gone crazy. No, it doesn't show you've gone crazy when you're angry about something. Now, I want to comment on Michael Flynn, General Michael Flynn. It does seem to come out correctly that he was putting forth the idea of troops, probably not uniformed troops, but troops under his command, who could steal the machines. All right, what would you do? I want to say first that I disapprove of any military involvement on domestic soil in this country, which is not to say that we didn't have it in Watertown in 2013. And related to the marathon, please see my book on that subject called Boston's Marathon Bombing. But if we have troops, that in itself is a very great loss to the Constitution. The whole point of our government being accountable and being, they all have to agree to what was agreed to originally, that is lost if you use force instead. But what could the Flynns and the others do when they are finding, as one always finds, that the DOJ won't prosecute, won't investigate? Why are people not being investigated? You shouldn't let it go. You shouldn't just say, that's how it is now. not okay, and it's not okay for you to say, that's how it is now. This is tragic and extremely dangerous. So, in terms of Mike Flynn, I hereby state that I don't want to see troops used, but you have to think of other methods. And by the way, just the other day, Sheriff Mack, who runs a very good organization called Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, and you can join it, he has found, and the Supreme Court supported him in, I think, 1997 around there, on the idea that sheriffs are answerable within their county to their voters, but they do not have to put up with feds coming in and telling them they have to do something. So I think the point of that case, which he won under the name Prince, P-R-I-N-T-Z, Prince, that he as a sheriff can interpose between the people, so he's protecting the people, and the feds. This is all very important. Please see my book called Keep the Republic. There are certain things that the feds can do and certain things they can't do. Now, in regard to any further business that came about of the invaders, just to show you how easy it is on YouTube or television for someone to misrepresent just by a simple phrase, and listen to it tonight, the hearings. You'll be able to identify many phrases where they say it in such a way. I think I heard Liz Cheney say the other day, the president was guilty of a dereliction of duty. And maybe he was. But a phrase like that coming from someone sitting in the halls of Congress, it all looks very, very correct, but she didn't give us the goods on that, and I could say that there's been many a person who's derelict in their duty. And I don't mean, and therefore it's okay for Trump to do it. Not okay. So the point I would like to make on that note is that when the courts put a case forward and it doesn't happen, and then in regard to Sidney Powell, who has been sued, you know, by two of the companies, I think Dominion and Smartmatic or something, that is a foolish case against her. And will it come to discovery? As soon as you have either a prosecution or a lawsuit, that would be a lawsuit for defamation, both parties are allowed to demand of the other party that they put their goods on the table. And let us see, for example, in Smartmatic, why any machines that are any software that is sold in the United States to use in elections, why it would allow for weighted voting. So on September 13th, when I'm running for Congress in the Republican primary of New Hampshire, if they say, if someone behind the scenes is saying, well, every time a vote comes in from Maxwell, we'll give it 70% of its value. Why is that in the software at all? It could never be part of our elections. We don't do it that way. So not only did the court not help so far Sidney Powell, as they should, and by the way, she's the author of a very fine book called Licensed to Lie, and she worked for the DOJ. She was a prosecutor, and she can tell you that they are licensed to lie. And good old Robert Steele, who recently died, allegedly, of COVID, was a whistleblower on that, and he said that when he was told, as a CIA man, to set up sort of like false flags or scripted, you know, terrorist events, he was told to tell the people who were being hired or otherwise coerced into participating that they would be fully protected, and that if they must lie to the court, and they would not get in trouble for lying to the court. So I've gone off the track there to mention Sidney Powell's book called Licensed to Lie. But most recently, I think as recently as a couple of weeks ago, in regard to her being threatened with disbarment, or losing her license to practice, the judge in the case said, I think the judge said it informally and hasn't made a ruling, but said, she, by her, insisting that there was fraud in the software, the judge said, she is harming democracy, and she's spoiling the people's faith in democracy. Sorry, Judge, you are spoiling my faith big time in democracy, and Miss Powell isn't. She may be wrong. We'll find out. Are her figures good or not? They look pretty good to me. And she doesn't fool around. But we don't know that yet. But we know she's not destroying people's faith in democracy. Does that mean for her to do the right thing and not spoil people's faith that she should shut her mouth when it comes to discovering crime? No. Okay. So the only other thing I want to say is, again, back to the role of deceitfulness. You may think that something's going to happen to make it all work out so that we don't have that problem anymore. No, I don't think that's possible. All that could happen is that you step forward and say, I don't put up with these lies. I can't stand these liars. Yeah, it's fun to say. And you could get together with a small group, just friends, and try to work it out together. It always gives you strength when just even a few people around your living room are saying the same thing or arguing against each other, but trying to work it out. That means you are as legitimate or as qualified as anyone to look at facts and make a deduction from it. That's all that anyone ever does officially, anyway. Thank you for listening.